So heavy. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. This is going to be part 2 of the massive book haul. I have an equally large amount of books to talk about today, just like in part 1. So if you enjoyed part 1, you're definitely going to enjoy part 2. It is a mix of fantasy and thrillers, and I think one contemporary novel. So let's begin. So I'm gonna start with a ultra famous fantasy series that I see all over booktube, and that is Vengeance by V.E. Schwab. Now I already have the first one, which is Vicious, and I don't think I've talked about Vengeance actually. So I wanted to talk about the fact that I did haul this one, and it is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, which I believe is actually signed. Yeah, it's signed by V.E. Schwab. I loved getting signed books, especially because if I know I'm gonna love the series, or if I suspect that I'm gonna love the series, then it's always really special to have that author signed novel. So this next book is also marketed as a fantasy book, and I believe that it is one. It is a popular book in Spain and has been written by a Spanish author. I think it's also pretty popular among other fantasy lovers, and that is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but hopefully I'm not butchering it. It's basically a book about books. It talks about this book owner's son who just recently lost his mother and finds solace in a book called The Shadow of the Wind, and then goes on to try to find the author's other works, where he realizes that those books have been systematically destroyed over time, intentionally, and he comes to discover that he might actually have the last of the author's books in his possession in his bookshop. So he ends up digging and trying to figure out what's going on with this author and why his books are being destroyed, and I guess that takes him on an adventure. I've heard a lot about this series through general articles and online, and this is the first of the series, but I know that there's like 3 or 4 more. But I just heard that it's such an amazing novel and that Carlos is an amazing author. So I'm really curious about this. I'm curious about the writing. I think it's supposed to be pretty dense. It is an adult book. I'm excited because it reminds me of a combination of other books, and I'm curious to see how that's going to resonate in this one. So the next book seems like it's got a mystical realism vibe with a thriller, so it's the best of both worlds in terms of what I'm interested in reading currently, and that is Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield. Now I've read one of her books already, and that was The 13th Tale, and it was a beautifully woven novel. Like, I didn't think I was gonna love it as much as I did, but I ended up adoring it. So when I saw this one and I saw that this one was on sale, I picked it up. This is about a young girl who dies and is later revived, and people in the town thinks it is because of the power of the river. She apparently grows up and becomes mute, so no one can ask her like who she is or where she's from, and apparently Diane ends up weaving another really wonderful and fantastical story in this book as well. So the next book is one that I've been intrigued by ever since I've heard about it, and that is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This book talks about beauty and belonging during the time period that Toni Morrison was growing up as a young woman, and I'm gonna leave it at that. I think it's one of those books that will become a classic if it's not already, and one of those books worth reading, especially in terms of American culture and what folks have gone through, and I think it's going to be amazing. Her writing tends to be heartbreaking and very intense, so I know I'm always in for a ride when I read any of her novels. The next one is also a super popular novel that apparently you can't find a hardback anymore, and that is Foundry by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is another one of those high fantasy novels in a completely new world that's woven in by the author. I believe this is a trilogy, and this is the first of the trilogy, and it's a story about a thief trying to make his way, basically, from what I understand. Kind of reminds me of the series by Robin Hobb, so I'm going to see if there's any similarities there. The next book is also another book that I saw on Bookstagram, and as soon as I read the synopsis and what the book was about, I just had to read it. It just seemed so compelling, and that is The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchison. This was actually pretty hard to find, and it is a thriller. So this is about a kidnapper of young women, and he calls it his butterfly garden, and the young women are his beautiful butterflies. He ends up getting caught, and the FBI brings in one of these young women to tell her story, and apparently it's got a lot of twists and turns, and I think it's gonna be one of those books that I just can't put down. I think the next few books are gonna be a pretty good mix of fantasy and thrillers, and one author that I've been wanting to read and I have never read before is actually Stephen King. Now, I was advised to start with one of his books specifically, and that is Pet Sematary. Now, I love this cover, so I got the crazy expensive hardcover, and it is absolutely stunning. I'm also a very big fan of cats, so this is really cool. I'm not going to go into the synopsis of this book because I think that everyone already knows about it, and everyone who loves thrillers and loves Stephen King has definitely read this one. So this is the one I plan to start with when it comes to his writing. I also picked up another one by Stephen King because I have a feeling that I'm going to like his writing, and even if I don't love it, I think his books are really good books to read to kind of get into the genre, and that is The Institute by Stephen King. Now, I am a big fan of psychological thrillers. I find them really interesting. I love how the brain works, and this one seems right up my alley. So this is basically about an institute that holds young children with extraordinary gifts, and they are trying to extract these extraordinary gifts from these children. So it doesn't seem like a crazy adventurous novel, but it does seem like it takes you for a ride, especially with these children who I'm sure are trying to escape and from the horrible things that they have to live through. Either way, I might love this one more than any of his other books just because it seems like something that I would love. I love shows like this, and I also love movies like this, so I am definitely reading this one after Pet Sematary, even if I don't love Pet Sematary that much. If you've read his work and if you're a fan of King's work, please let me know. I always love reading what other books are his most popular. I've seen him being interviewed, and he just seems to have the most incredible mind and the best, sassiest opinions. The next book is, I believe, a fantasy book, and it's got this very nature soul type of vibe, and that is The Fox in the Whale by Jordana Max Brodsky. I have heard that she has written another series, and I can't think of it off the top of my mind right now, but I've heard really good things about her writing, and I've heard about this book I think mainly through Goodreads, and so I ended up reading the synopsis and reading some of the reviews, and it sounded like an amazing read. I ended up grabbing it. So I'm going to read the back of the novel because I think that will give you guys a better understanding of what this book is about versus me trying to explain it myself. So it starts off with a quote. "There is a very old story, rarely told, of a wolf that runs into the ocean and becomes a whale. Born with the soul of a hunter and the spirit of the wolf, Omat is destined to follow in her grandfather's footsteps, invoking the spirits of the land, sea, and sky to protect her people. But the gods have stopped listening, and Omat's family is starving. Alone at the edge of the world, hope is all they have left. Desperate to save them, Omat journeys across the icy wastes, fighting for survival with every step. When she meets a Viking warrior and his strange new gods, they set in motion a conflict that could shatter her world. Or save it." So this sounds like it's gonna have a lot of Nordic / Viking type of folklore in it, and I'm very intrigued by the spiritual aspect of the magic that I think it's gonna have too. If you read this novel, let me know. I haven't heard too many people that have actually read it that I know on BookTube or that it's been like widely talked about, but I'm definitely intrigued to see what other folks have thought of it if you have read it. The next book is the last thriller that I bought, and that is Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. I think this one has been widely discussed on both Bookstagram and BookTube, so I thought I would take the plunge and grab it since I think right now it's on sale at Barnes & Noble, at least the hardcover is. So this book has obviously got to do with deaths in water, and I believe that a single mother gets murdered and gets dragged into the water and drowns, and the same thing happens to someone else earlier that summer. So what happens is that the single mother has a daughter that she's left behind who goes to live with her aunt, and these murders in the water have brought up certain other secrets that were supposed to be left behind. I think this is going to be a good thriller. I'm hoping that there's a little bit of magical realism in it as well, because how cool would it be to have like a river or like a lake come alive and be eating its villagers? But that's just my like really gross wish. Let me know if you read this one. I've heard a lot of decent things about it. Not everyone's favorite, but I've heard that it's like a good fun read. So the next book is a YA fantasy, and it is by an author whose previous series I really loved. It is also one of my most anticipated reads for this year, so I ended up snapping it as soon as it came out. I kind of wanted to get a signed copy, but I couldn't find one anywhere. It is Incendiary by Zoraida Cordova. This one came out, I believe, in late April, so it just just came out. It is about a girl who has memory magic, and she is a memory thief, which is probably one of the most rare types of magic in her world. So she gets snatched up by the king and ends up working for his spies. Now she ends up falling in love with this one boy who ends up being kidnapped or taken, and so she goes back to her city to try to complete his mission, where I think she ends up staying and kind of gets caught in all this drama at the royal court where she used to be. And I think secrets just come flooding out about her past and about who she is and about the kingdom itself. So I'm really excited about this book. This might actually be one of the next ones that I pick up. I love Zoraida Cordova's writing. I read her Bruja Born series, at least the first two. I haven't read the last one. I don't know if that one's out yet, but I read the first two of her Bruja Born series, and that series was really good. She has a way of getting you really invested in characters that you wouldn't normally think you would be invested in. So that is the end of part 2 of my massive book haul. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you do want Kindle versions of book hauls, let me know. I've been shopping for ebooks recently, and I would love to share those with you if there is any interest. Now, if you have read any of the books that I just talked about, please let me know in the comments down below, and please let me know what you thought of them. I'm always intrigued to see what other people think of the books I'm going to read, even if that does make me a little biased. If you liked this video, please go ahead and give it a like, and please subscribe to my channel if you like my content. That really helps support my channel. Thank you.